Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Boykin, and I am here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California, where the flannel shirt is our state flag, the pit bull is our state bird, and cannabis is our state flower. I am joined today by Taylor Hudak, who is the co-founder of Action for Assange. She's an independent journalist, and I couldn't be more stoked to have her join me today to talk about this. Taylor, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
I'm all right. I have a fucked up last name, so if I mutilated your last name, you can let me know, and I will apologize for that, and then I will try hard not to do it again.
Okay, it's fine. It's Hudak.
Okay, I think that's what I thought I said. Right on.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So, I guess, real quick, you were telling me before the show, but for the benefit of the audience, how did you get involved with this? How did you get involved with Andrew and come to create Action for Assange?
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty interesting story. We met on a show where we just kind of were guests on Anonymous Bites Back, and we both realized that we were both in Ohio, so he and I decided to kind of join forces and really try to make a difference together and work together to try to bring awareness to Julian's dire situation and also Chelsea Manning's situation. And being that we were so close, we figured that we would kind of like go out every week and post signs and take to the streets and try to bring awareness to these situations to people who otherwise would not be exposed to it. And also our goal is to fight censorship. We know that online it's heavily censored, and we're kind of just talking to each other, those who are part of the free speech community, per se. We're all just talking to each other. So this is a way of kind of reaching out to other people.
All right. I'm sorry, I've got a computer yelling at me. I was actually familiar with Andrew based solely on his YouTube screen name before I came to, quote unquote meet him and then have him on the show. I don't know. There are so few people that are out there doing the work. You can go ahead and walk through, man. So this is a working music studio. There's people that show up from time to time. There's so very few people that are out there doing the work to make information about Julian Assange available, accurate information about Julian Assange available. And for you guys to be doing that independently and then be able to come together and from what Andrew was telling me, have permission from Julian Assange's mother to continue Unity for J Vigils is really fucking awesome, because there is nothing but, with the exception of a handful of people, misinformation, bad information, deliberate smearing of Julian Assange. And that's mostly why you're here today, is so we can go through and debunk some of that. I am going to have to yell at my producer, though, because I need an Ethernet cable if we're going to continue to live stream. So, hey, Barry! I wonder if that'll work. Anywho, so if you want to, man, fire away with some stuff that you've had to debunk in real time. Can you hear me?
Okay. You're breaking up. Yeah. Oh, now it's telling me my internet's unstable.
Here, let me cut the live stream.
Wait, I gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So when
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you're talking to people in real life, because I assume that anybody who's gone to the trouble of creating something like Action for Assange does in real life and not just on the computer, talk to people about this. What do you encounter? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, so on July 3rd, Julian's 48th birthday, we participated in Candles for Assange. I want to make note, though, that we are not Candles for Assange, but we participated in the worldwide birthday celebrations for Julian. So because we knew that people would probably not come to us, we decided to go to a 4th of July event in Elyria, Ohio, and we had a cake for Julian, and we had our signs out. And we basically just kind of attracted people because we had cake and we also had water bottles. And people would come up to us, and our method was, when they approached us, we would say, "Do you know who Julian Assange is?" And most people would say no. And then we would go on to explain who he was. Once we mentioned WikiLeaks, people then started to kind of understand who we were talking about, and we could see like it start to click for some people. And the reception was quite good, actually. We were really pleased with it. People, when we told them about this, they were very shocked, and to hear all that was happening, because they're obviously not exposed to this information in the mainstream media. So when they hear about this, they were shocked, and people were very willing to engage with us. Of course, there were the occasional, person who didn't really care and was just kind of trying to grab a piece of cake or water and then, go their own way. But the reception was pretty good. Now, of course, we did have one incident where we were posting signs on utility poles. Apparently in Oberlin, Ohio, you cannot do that. It was considered advertising, which is a violation of one of our ordinances. Our signs say no torture. Our signs say free Julian Assange, free Chelsea Manning, and other similar messages. So it's really not advertising. But that we had a little trouble there. And we're going to try to, well, I'm not really going to go into that too much. That's Andrew saying I don't want to speak too much on it, but that's when we kind of had some issues. But other than that, with our engagement with people and the public has been quite good.
That's good. I noticed that if you get the opportunity to talk to people away from the influence of Mockingbird media, they let their guard down a little bit. And when they don't feel like they have to outright defend propaganda, they kind of listen a little bit more. Because I get where we live over the last 10 years has really been starting to get gentrified by these cop calling NPR liberals who really think they're doing the right thing by putting on a knitted hat and demanding that you have a reusable bag, but really don't give a fuck if Julian Assange sits in the UK's Guantanamo Bay getting tortured while fucking truth goes ahead and gets fucking silenced again because they've been told that he's a bad guy because he helped Donald Trump win the fucking presidential election, which of course is 100% bullshit and lies. But that's
exactly, that is not true at all.
That's the overall mentality of what, I'm not going to say everybody around here has, but when you go someplace and you meet people who are generally comfortable, Santa Cruz County is an insanely expensive place to live. It is, it's full of Silicon Valley money or the professional class in general. And these are the people who are most directly affected by quote-unquote liberal media, but, the fucking Rachel Maddow's giving everybody fucking brainworms, and even to a huge degree, NPR, who has Google and Koch brother money, putting out this narrative that Julian Assange is not a real journalist, that he's, in league with Vladimir Putin, or that he's a fucking rapist, and all of which is just bullshit.
Yeah, it's a tactic to discredit him and to make people dislike him. They want to make it so people could say, well, I agree with his First Amendment rights, but, or, oh, I like that WikiLeaks published this, but, and there are a lot of lies out there about him. Number one, the fact that he's not a journalist, and I know we were talking about this earlier, but for the people watching, that his being a journalist or not being a journalist does not matter at all, because the United States government, at least, does not provide any sort of certification to be a journalist. It's not like becoming a doctor or an attorney where there has to be some sort of licensure. That's not the case with journalists, and journalists, therefore, are not granted greater First Amendment protections than any other human being. So that argument doesn't even matter, and it's not up to the government to decide who is and who isn't a journalist. And a lot of people in power and politicians will go there and say that he's not, and I always say, well, for somebody who is not a journalist and for an organization that's not a journalistic organization, they've sure won plenty of journalism awards.
Not only that, but every time someone has tried to go after them for what they've printed, they've lost. Because WikiLeaks has never fucking released a single amount of information that has been able to be verifiably false.
Exactly. They have 100% proven track record. No other media organization, I think, even comes close to that. Everything that they've published has been accurate. And I also think that there's probably some sort of animosity with that and some competition between other media outlets that don't support WikiLeaks, because what happens is that WikiLeaks publishes a really very important set of documents, something that's really earth-shattering, really. And the media, the mainstream media, then they can't ignore it. They have to acknowledge it. So what they do is they kind of undermine the publication, or they say that it puts lives in jeopardy, which is always interesting because we know that's not true. That is a tactic, that is a national security state argument that, oh, you release this classified information, it could potentially put people's lives at risk. So that's always the argument that's often made, and it's not true. Nobody has been killed as a result of any of the publications.
Well, and there's more to it than that, really. We know that our intelligence community, by and large, determines what 90% of media is reporting on. We know that our intelligence community and the intelligence communities of other countries who have had their information released by WikiLeaks have been working for over a decade now to get this son of a bitch, Julian Assange, for exposing the crimes of empire. And when you hear the same narrative, even if it's spun a little bit differently, it's the same narrative coming out of every aspect of what I call mockingbird media, you have to look at it as, okay, this is fucking a narrative that's being put out for a reason. These people normally would never agree with each other on this thing. The fact that they all support it and they're all fucking scumbags leads me to believe that maybe not, maybe the entire picture isn't being presented accurately. And to get people to stop and think about that for a minute, it's kind of becoming easier. But it's kind of not like you hit a wall with people as to how far they're willing to go to drop their cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. They say that people literally get physically ill if they're exposed to information that sort of clashes with their own belief system, which is really a bizarre thing, but that's what's happening. And I think that's that's absolutely what we saw with the Hillary Clinton's emails, the Podesta emails. People were exposed to that information. It made them angry because it went against what they wanted to believe, and it went against the person that they wanted to essentially become president. So then they hated the person who exposed the message instead of
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
I mean, really involved in some sketchy behavior.
You froze out there for a moment.
Yeah, it just said my internet's unstable. Okay.
You know what? This happens more during conversations about Julian Assange than anybody else. I'm not even kidding, man. We've had some serious weirdness happen, and I'm not even live streaming anymore. The one thing we overlooked when we started was plugging in the goddamn Ethernet cable to up the speed so it was transmitting it like nothing. So, lesson learned. God, I just fucking lost it. Yeah, no, we really have, there have been some serious weird audio. Do you know who Savage Joy is? Joy Man, have you seen her stuff? She broadcasts on Real Progressives. She's interviewed, I think, close to like 200 candidates now in the last few years, and is a very, very strong Bernie Sanders advocate. And I had her on to talk about how the DNC may fuck over Bernie Sanders. This was this was last year before we even got into primary season yet. And that interview has, like, she was coming through in reverb and in 4 different pitches all at once, if at all. Fucking weird.
That is weird. Do you think there's something to it?
Of course I think there's something to it. We had Cynthia McKinney on the show, and we could count down. We could do a countdown to when her audio would stop being fucked with, and we could go and talk again. Like, it's just, I think that anybody who is putting out information that's counter to the narrative is going to be fucked with. And the full-on attack against Julian Assange to destroy his character, to get people to believe that, like, he's somehow a horrible human being for being locked in an embassy, and that, like, there was a rumor coming out, or stories coming out, presented in fucking regular mainstream media, that, like, oh, he probably smells bad. Like, as a legitimate piece of fucking news, Or like, oh, this poor cat.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. And they did that to, again, make him a very dislikable person. And then people believe it. That's the problem, too, is that people don't question anything. They're like completely anesthetized. They just don't question anything. But yeah, there's been, of course, like plenty of like smear campaigns against this guy. Number one, I mean, with the he's a rapist thing. So first of all, we know that that's not true. And also, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, said that he speaks fluent Swedish, said that the legal definition of rape in Swedish is very different from English. And in the English-speaking world, and probably other countries around the world, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was violence involved. So that's never been reported on. Nobody acknowledges that. And that's another thing, too, where there's just sort of this misreporting. There's this laziness around this whole situation, and just nobody's really digging into the facts here.
Well, you nailed it earlier when you said there's jealousy on the part of people in the media about this, because Julian Assange and WikiLeaks has done what journalists are supposed to do, and that is print information that the people in power don't want printed because it exposes them for the fucking war criminals and fucking profiteers that they are. When 6 companies own 90 to 95% of all media, and those 6 companies are inherently intertwined with expanding the American empire, our death economy on every faction, from pharmaceuticals to fucking bombs. That, like, Rachel Maddow didn't go to school to be a fucking CIA puppet. She didn't. That Jake Tapper probably didn't apply for a job at CNN because he knew that his job was going to make that serious fucking newsman face, never question authority, never ask a follow-up, and only repeat what's on the teleprompter. Like, they probably thought that they wanted to do some good in the world, I do think Barry Weiss went into journalism so she could be a fucking establishment puppet. but that's a different story. So when you find yourself in your career and you're a functionary of the establishment, you're a stenographer to power, and that is your only role, and somebody like Julian Assange comes along, or somebody like Whitney Webb or Elizabeth Voss or Joe Lauria, those people, that group, when they come along, their first reaction is to just assassinate their fucking character, destroy everything about them that they can, because there's a reckoning that has to go through their minds. Like, holy fuck, these people are doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but I can't because I'm in the job that I'm in,
Right, they'll get fired. You have to push. Another thing is that you have to push war. You have to be in the mainstream media. Anybody that questions that, they are going to be done. They're going to be fired, because we know that wars make tons of money. But definitely these independent journalists, sure, are threats to those in establishment media. And I'm pretty sure that all the statistics are showing that people are going to YouTube for their news. They're going to comedians. They're going to independent journalists for their news. Not as much as we would like, but definitely that's the way it's shifting. So it's seen as a threat. But yeah, like I said, these mainstream journalists do not like Assange because he essentially did the job that they should have been doing, and it's embarrassing for them. And also, they have to obviously publish. Or not publish what he said, but they have to at least acknowledge these publications. And the New York Times and The Guardian, among others, have published the same documents that WikiLeaks has, yet they're not being charged. So it does point to a political persecution, and this is not really about justice and the law at all.
Well, we have Department of Defense officials on record saying, we're going to destroy this man's character.
Right.
It's not any kind of stretch of an imagination to say this is a deliberate thing, because we've got high-ranking government officials saying, "Fuck yes, that's what we're doing, and that's what we do." We've got the women who
Mike
accused
Pompeo?
him. Huh? Oh,
Mike
among
Pompeo
others, yeah,
said
absolutely.
He's horrible. He said that WikiLeaks was a hostile intelligence agency. I'm pretty sure he said that they were also linked to the Russian government.
Yeah.
He's saying that to people, and people look to him as former CIA director, now Secretary of State. People look at him and take his words seriously. It's so dangerous.
And then you've got Hillary Clinton fucking wondering if you could drone strike Assange out loud. Like, that's...
Yeah. And laughs about it.
Yeah.
And she laughs about it. She doesn't even hide the fact that, or doesn't even try to pretend like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. No, she laughs about it and said it was a joke.
Yeah, just like throwing your head back and cackling over the fucking complete evisceration of Muammar Gaddafi was, a joke.
Yeah, she said, we came, we saw, we died. He died.
Yeah, and fucking chuckled. Like,
and laughed, yeah.
Yeesh. At any rate, like, I want to go over a couple of things real quick that, I feel like need to be pointed out, because again, there's no representation for clear and salient minds regarding Julian Assange outside of a very small number of people. And then I also want to get back to a point you made about people coming to YouTube for their news. The women who brought forth sexual assault allegations against Julian Assange, one outright admitted she was coerced to do it by fucking, I don't know if she said British police or MI6, but was coerced to bring charges. The other one has said that she was pressured to do it, and in no way whatsoever did Julian Assange actually do the things that she was accusing him of doing. Sweden isn't going after him on this. Mm-hmm. It's been dropped again after already being dropped.
Yeah. Well, he's accused of not any violent behavior. It was consensual sex. They said that he broke a condom on purpose. He's saying that he did not. She's saying that he did. And that, I guess, constitute as rape in Sweden.
What it
But there's
is
no
is
evidence because they brought it into evidence.
It's not a
They
rape
brought a Rich
charge.
condom
It's
into
like an
evidence.
aggravated assault charge.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I think it's an aggravated. I've got it right here. What is it? Yeah, it's an assault charge. It's not a rape charge. At any rate,
Well, it's not a charge, actually. It's never charged.
or accusation.
That's
You're
another
right.
thing,
He was
too.
never charged and
Yeah,
has been dropped and
never
has been
charged.
dropped. Yeah, yeah, and yeah. The investigation that they did do, the evidence disclosed no crime at all.
So it's clearly a setup because the ripped condom that was taken into evidence, they tested it at two separate forensic testing facilities, I believe, and they determined that his DNA was not on the condom and neither was hers.
Right.
So clearly it was not from that particular sexual encounter. So it was obviously evidence that they were trying to kind of plant, I guess.
I mean, we do live in a country where almost 70% of people at one time thought that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
And that he was involved in 9/11 too. Yeah. People believe that.
They believe that. If they believe that, they'll believe that Chelsea Manning is a traitor, and they'll believe that Julian Assange is a Bond villain who fucking worked directly for Vladimir Putin. It's insane to me that in a country where 72% of the people have an unfavorable opinion of the media, where they will admit that okay, it's probably not just Fox or probably not just MSNBC that has fake news. It's almost 3/4 of the country. Know that what they're getting told by their corporate media is bullshit, but still refuse to drop the fucking talking points. And I don't know what it takes to get people over the line for that. You know, I mean, it takes stuff like Action for Assange. It takes stuff like getting out there and fucking putting this stuff in people's eye line so that they've got a frame of reference when you're talking to them about reality.
Yeah, and we also try to emphasize, too, that Assange was a man of the people. These people on the mainstream media and the politicians and the people in power, and unfortunately, are not working for us. Their interest is not for the common person. It's just not. But Julian Assange has risked so much. So the fact for our right to know, for the public's right to know. So we try to explain that and emphasize that point, and that's really hit home for a lot of people. And we basically tell them, listen, the more eyes and the more people are watching a government entity, the better that government entity is going to behave. If they know that if they are corrupt, if they're committing crimes, that could potentially be exposed.
Well, and that's the problem, is that anytime you try to expose the crimes of empire, that, as you were saying, that umbrella of national security comes into play. It boggles me that the people who think that Q is a real thing and not just some fucking NSA psyop think that Julian Assange would be provided a free and open trial in court with media and cameras, and that it's some sort of orchestration by Donald Trump to out the cabal. And it's so fucking silly. John Kiriakou, who's been on this show a few times and who was on the Unity for J Vigils pretty consistently, did a thorough debunking of that talking point because he's been through the process in that exact court that Julian Assange would be tried in for the same charges on the Espionage Act. His legal team wasn't allowed access to the evidence being used against him because of the umbrella of national security. The thought that they would allow Julian Assange's legal team somehow a different consideration than they did a CIA whistleblower is fucking preposterous.
It is. It doesn't make any sense because if you are charged with a crime that's related to national security, you have to have a national security clearanced attorney, somebody within the own system, which is insane to me. So yeah, his attorney would not be able to access any of the information. It would not be a public trial. It would be very closed off. And yeah, QAnon is, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's without a doubt, a CIA, NSA job to kind of get people to accept the extradition of Assange to the United States. I think, not to be pushing conspiracy theories on your show, but that has to be it, because no intelligent person who has any clue about how government works would possibly believe that he would receive a fair trial here. No, he wouldn't. This is a national security related crime. So,
well, not only that, but Elizabeth Voss has called it hope porn. Like that was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was her coin right there. But it is what Q does is what the original Anonymous did, in that it presents some credibility in its anonymity by giving out little bits of information that kind of might have some accuracy to them amid a web of shit. And then it hooks people and prevents them from becoming activated in their own right because that one shoe hasn't dropped. And while they're at it, they pick up hackers who they can then turn and get to work for intelligence agencies. It's a fucking... I mean, it's clearly a psyop. It's clearly something that intelligence agencies have hatched in order to fucking better catalog people, in order to make sure that people don't go active by giving them something to wait for. You know, that's another thing that frustrates the fuck out of me about the Q idiots, is that you know, trust the plan. Like, just wait for it. Just wait for it. It's coming any day. And they believe it no matter how many any days have passed. And Anonymous is the same way. We're going to hack the fucking Pentagon. No, you're not. Okay, well, here's a list of some bankers in Belgium. And they did some bad stuff. So we're Anonymous and we're badass. We're Legion. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't buy it.
Well, the two aren't related.
Q Anonymous and Anonymous are only related because of the way that the operation works. Like, they're not putting out the same information by any means. But if Anonymous is a hacker collective and Q is a fucking collective of intelligence professionals that are delivering fucking vital information that will help people fight the cabal, like, I don't know. It's similar in function, if not in scope. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. But I could see why there would be sort of within Anonymous a level of, I think it's moved more from, and I could be wrong here, but I think it's moved more from not just hackers, but also people who are activists too.
Yeah.
So maybe it's changed a little bit. And I know it's not a movement, it's an idea, but I think that people that associate with that, it's not just hackers anymore, but or digital activists, but just activists in general who are kind of agreeing upon the same idea.
And I see that, but I also remember that there were a lot of people that got rounded up during Occupy. And right. There were a lot of people whose voices were silenced through really illegal arrest because of the online activism that they were doing in regards to Occupy. And I remember that Anonymous was at the center of that. And I don't know if you get as good as Occupy was infiltrated as fuck. I don't know how how old you are or what you were doing, 10 years ago. I don't.
I was 16 10 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
But I know I'm familiar with Occupy.
Well, no, I mean, it's not even that. Like, I just, I was out here in California, um, and I went up to the Oakland Occupy because I had a good friend who would, like, it was her first rodeo with protests, and she was volunteering at the medical tent in Oakland at Occupy, and I was like, holy fuck, you're gonna get your ass kicked. I, like, please let me help you out a little bit. Um, but just seeing how thoroughly infiltrated Occupy had become by the time it made it out to Oakland, I can only imagine what the agent provocateur, off-duty cop, on-duty FBI agent ratio to genuine protester was in Zuccotti Park. You know, um, I don't think that an organization gets its not really structure, but all of the main elements that help it thrive infiltrated the way Occupy did without an online presence like Anonymous making sure that agents provocateurs and off-duty cops and on-duty FBI agents had a detailed list of who exactly they were going after when they went to these things. It was a really long way of saying that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. True. And I think there's, no, it does. And I think there's also too, probably like, people have to worry about who they're talking to, oftentimes because, if somebody's undercover or something or trying to kind of like get into a certain community of people and disguise themselves, I feel like people have a legitimate reason to maybe be concerned about that. I don't know if that's at all what you were alluding to in any way.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think that that's why I think personal communication, getting outside of the digital sphere when you're doing activism is what makes successful activism. And because I've been involved in protests and fucking organizations and movements and actions over the years, even at like the infancy of the internet, the internet is good for snapping somebody awake.
It's also dangerous too because we know that the government can abuse it, and we know that they have with mass surveillance.
It's their tool. They made it. They made the internet. It was ARPANET. It was developed by a company called ARPA that is now called DARPA, and it was their way to send packets of information to each other over distance, and that has turned into the internet. We know that Facebook, and we know that now YouTube or Google have all received intelligence community money for startup.
Yeah.
Who was it? It might have been somebody real high up in the intelligence service, and I'll try and find it before we're out of here, said that Facebook was the greatest surveillance tool ever created.
Yeah, and it probably is.
Well, they just got in trouble. Like that whole thing about exposing the Facebook sites where border guards are saying horrific things and threatening to do horrific things, even to elected officials and shit like that. The Facebook released DMs from that members of that group to media outlets and released posts from this closed private group to media outlets. And yeah, dude, if people are plotting to fucking, try and assault fucking members of Congress who are going to these places to see what's in them, yes, they should be exposed for that. But when you step back and look at it a minute, you're like, holy fuck, dude, Facebook just released 100% of this information, at least to law enforcement, if not the media outright. What the fuck are these people doing? And now they want a currency?
Right.
You saw that, right?
Yeah, no, it's scary to think about because No, it is nerve-wracking, because when your intelligence agencies become political, you have a really, really big problem. And we know that they certainly are political and probably have been for some time now. Also, another point I want to address too is that they watch everybody. If you're looking for like the one like bad person who could potentially harm many, many people, you don't need to surveillance everybody. And by doing that too, it's been proven that it's actually ineffective. If you watch everybody, you have so much information on people that you can't pinpoint those who really are a threat. And I don't think that they're really even, well, I think in addition to looking for people who are potential threats to others, they're obviously trying to sell us all kinds of things and get our data because of, by doing that. So yeah, it's been proven that it just doesn't work. When you have so much information, you don't really know anything, if that makes sense.
The CIA director, and right after George Bush left as being CIA director to go be Ronald Reagan's handler or vice president or whatever, his name was William Casey. And in 81, there was a meeting between him, Reagan, and a few other people, and it's just kind of, going around the room like, how's your organization going? How's your organization going? Blah. And they get to William Casey, and he says, we will know our disinformation campaign is complete when nothing the American people believe is the truth. This has been verified by the woman who was the original source for the quote, Ray McGovern, who's been on many of the Unity for J vigils, who was a security analyst forever and co-founded VIPS, Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, co-founded that organization with Bill Binney, who was the NSA codebreaker, who did write the program that would have allowed the government to surveil high-level targets without surveilling all of us. And they went with the program that surveilled all of us. And so Bill Binney left all pissed off about it, and co-founded VIP. But Ray McGovern throws that quote out a lot, the Bill Casey one, the "We'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when nothing the American public believes is the truth." And that's where we're at. There's a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff that I would recommend you, because you brought up, how Facebook makes money off of our information while they're disclosing every intimate detail of our lives to whatever intelligence agency they happen to be giving it to at the time. Earlier, I'm jumping around a bit. I'm going to try and wrap it down. So I got to get out of here in like 20 minutes or so. Earlier you talked about more people coming to YouTube for their information. And when Andrew was on the other night, we kind of touched on this. And it's kind of cool how you guys are pretty simpatico on where you're at and where you're coming from, even though you have not been in the same room, at least on this show. It's cool to see how synchronistically you guys operate. YouTube's kind of fucking, like, it's great for us because I wouldn't be able to do my thing on a radio station. Number one, I say fuck too much. Number two, the stuff that I talk about would never be allowed to be put on anything but pirate radio. But YouTube can pull my platform anytime they want to.
Exactly. They're run by Google, so that's, I think, a major threat, is that they're run by Google and they are starting to enforce these weird regulations. So I don't think it's long before they potentially start to kind of censor people even more than they already are. Sorry, I kind of cut you off there. But I wanted to mention that Google runs, and I think Jimmy Dore made a reference to this. He said,
oh, of course you freeze up right
my
there.
platform at any time, like by talking or being critical of Google. So that's the problem when, and that's what the mainstream media has as an issue, is that they're run by the very people that they are supposed to be exposing and holding to account.
And And then you see organizations like the Young Turks, which are very friendly with YouTube, have a partnership with YouTube to where they pay money and YouTube promotes their content. They're the largest online news source, like oldest and largest online news source, Young Turks. They're the online home of Mockingbird Media Talking Points. That's where you go to now to get the narrative delivered to you by millennials and Cenk Uygur, you know? And it makes what we do all the more difficult when you have to not only combat the bullshit that the major networks are putting out, or that even like quote unquote, you know, hipster channels like Vox or Vice are putting out. Vox is owned by fucking Comcast and NBC. You know, they're
Right.
not. And Marcos Malitzis, the Daily Kos guy. Vice was what? Gavin McInnes and Bill Maher?
Yeah.
You know?
I think it was Gavin McInnes, which is a far-right Canadian conservative commentator, right? Now
Yeah.
it's more leaning to the left a little bit. But with the Young Turks, too, is that they claim to be very progressive. But I'm just really suspicious because aren't they endorsing Elizabeth Warren?
So they have
That's
all...
like weird.
They have all but come right out and endorsed her. And you know you're full of shit when you're branding your network the home of the progressives. If you're going to wear that shit like that.
That's a good point.
You know? And then fucking Cenk has Neera Tanden on, and they have an all fucking sweet conversation. Or he's got Elizabeth Warren on, and she tells him on his show, oh, fuck yeah, I'm taking that corporate money in the general. And he doesn't fucking follow up.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, absolutely. Cenk Uygur is a fucking libertarian grifter. He has been forever. What he did is he found a fantastic fucking niche and got in early in terms of putting out quote-unquote progressive media on the internet. More often than not, Cenk will find a way to work into one of his broadcasts that he used to be a Republican. He didn't stop being a Republican. He just figured out how to be a better con man. You know, when you look at the trajectory of when they really started to get popular, and then they took the Jeffrey Katzenberg money, you'll see them really pushing their progressive commentators, Jimmy Dore, the work that Jordan Sheridan was doing as a field reporter. They pushed the shit out of their pro-Bernie people, and then they got Jeffrey Katzenberg's $20 million. They turned into fucking MSNBC with occasional swear words, and they've got people who fully think that, yes, you know, Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland are woke because they think there's hope in Elizabeth Warren or some shit like that. You're right, though. They've done all but endorse her. And I think that Anna and Emma are like going to eventually stab one another over who gets to be Elizabeth Warren's favorite TYT commentator. Shit's gonna get real because they're already really worked up about being called out for their support of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, good point. Also, too, I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. Yeah, they also, with their Russia reporting on the Russia narrative, too, that kind of made me skeptical as well, because they were really, really pushing that. And it made no sense because, you know, if you think that the president, and I think Jimmy Dore said this, and it's so true, if you think that the president is such a dumb guy and he's such an idiot, then how the hell did he get around the CIA, the FBI, and collude with Russia? That doesn't make sense. You have to pick one, you know? But yeah, they pushed that a lot, and basically were pretty hostile to anybody who questioned that whole narrative that was being pushed out. And we know that that was done intentionally, and that the mainstream media didn't even apologize for their misreporting on this.
No,
and Rachel Maddow, who pushed it so much, went on to host the Democratic debates where they gave Elizabeth Warren the last word too. Mm-hmm. They gave her the first word, and they gave her the last word. And I wrote about this in one of our articles on actionforassange.com, where I listed everything that the candidates have said about Julian Assange. I mentioned how they really favored her and gave her the first and last word. But those debates, I mean, are never really quite fair as far as time.
Well, they're not. Okay, if we're going to believe the pretense that we have free and fair elections in this country, if we're going to believe the fiction that the Democratic primary process is legitimate, then you would absolutely look at those debates and be like, wow, that was really disappointing from every standpoint that I can think of. But yeah, it was an Elizabeth Warren commercial. The fact that Tulsi Gabbard spoke for like 6.5 minutes and was the most searched candidate on Google that night says a lot about the weight of the words that these candidates carry. You know, because they did. They gave Elizabeth Warren the floor. She said a whole lot of nothing. She basically did like a spoken word version of Bernie Sanders' greatest hits. And fucking, yeah, like it's empty. People know when they're being fed empty words. I think more often than not. I think people want to believe.
I like to think so.
Well, I think people want to believe in Elizabeth Warren, so they're willing to make an exception. But I think that they know that it's bullshit. I mean, again, if 3/4 of the country recognizes that their news is full of shit, on some level they get it. I have a boss who has Warren swag in his office, and I asked him, you know, like, what is it about her that why is she your girl? You know, and he looked at me like, are we really going to do this, guy? And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything at all. I just want to know.
That's the problem, too. People can't have the conversation. Like, they can't even, like, discuss it. That's another issue, is that we are so polarized that the discussion can't even be had. And I think a lot of people support mainstream, or a lot of people support these establishment candidates because they feel that, oh, they could win, or that, you know, voting for Jill Stein or this third-party candidate is taking away from the person who could potentially win the election.
Well, that's the spin.
It's a really arrogant thing to argue.
Yeah. But I asked him, you know, and I'm not going to try and get into an argument with you or anything. I just want to know, you know, what it is about her. Why is she your girl? And he's like, well, I really like what she has to say. And I said, you like what a politician has to say during election season? Man, I'm surprised. I'm gonna guess that she's for good things and against bad things. Is that about right? You know? And he kind of looked at me like, fuck. Yeah, she's a politician. All right, I get it. You know, and walked away. And I'm like, goddamn right you get it, because you know, but you've decided to make an exception for this person because you feel like this person will probably still represent your personal financial concerns while implementing some small tinkering around the edges of capitalism, or, you know, maybe throwing a couple of bucks, but not too much of your couple of bucks to the poor. And that's why you've decided to buy this bullshit, but deep down you know it's bullshit.
Yeah, and another problem too is that they but like say the issues at the border, immigration, and all of that. But the point is that these people are so dead set on campaigning. Once they get elected, they start campaigning again, that they need these problems to continue on for them to get elected, because then they have no talking points, they have no platform. So that's a real issue with our system. But yeah, they need these to be problems. So they really don't. And if you look at their actions, they really don't take any measures to really fix things. If you look at their voting records, but they need there to be something wrong for them to run on.
Well, that's and I mean, this comes back to intelligence agency influence, because problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem for an expected reaction so you can implement a solution is like on page 1 of CIA handbook as to how to destabilize a country, or how to fucking take over a group, or how to fucking get your narrative out there. And you're exactly right. I mean, that's they're not going to get elected because of what they're going to do. They're going to get elected, at least in terms of the public, because of how they're going to deal with the problems that they themselves help create. And that's fucking
Right.
it's a it's a fucking Mobius strip of idiocy. that we would.
It is.
I'm gonna title this Mobius strip of idiocy. I like that. Let's just spell out.
I like it too.
Taylor, I kind of got to bounce. Is there anything that you would like to get out before we knock off?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to emphasize to everybody, and I think your followers are supporters of Assange and WikiLeaks, but I really want to emphasize the importance of getting out there and doing something instead of just talking to each other on the internet. Yes, that's important, but it's also important to take actions, and we provide templates with signs to make it easier for people to do that. You could go to our website, action4assange.com. And we really encourage people to get out there and do things, because it is up to the people to help save him. And it sounds very idealistic and very optimistic, but it's going to take, we have to start somewhere, and it's going to take the people to really make a difference in this case. So that's what I encourage everyone to do, and to do what they can. Yeah. That's all I have.
I couldn't agree with you more. Nobody has ever legislated their way out of an oligarchy. No one has ever legislated their way into more and better free speech after it's been taken away from them. So it's got to be a people-oriented and people-driven movement. It's got to be one of those things where you get your ass out into the street and you talk to people in real time, in real life. Taylor Hudak, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. This has been Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen, and good luck to us all.